Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the New Era Capabilities webinar focusing on pandemic and disaster planning. I'm Joe Gillis, the Business Development Director for New Era Technology. I'll be moderating this event. Before we get going, I'd like to cover a few different housekeeping topics. We will be recording this event and it will be available on our website. A link will be sent out to everyone that registers. We will have time for questions at the end of the presentation. Place your questions in the Q&A window in the chat area on your screen. So today we will have an expert on, Lee Hovermale from FlexManage, a New Era company. He's the CEO from that organization. He will be discussing pandemic response and disaster planning and returning the workforce to their organizations. So right now, I'd like everyone to introduce Lee Hovermale.
Thank you, Joe. So the way we will approach this is we're going to talk about the capabilities that we have with the New Era partnership, as well as some relative examples on the way that we approach the situations, how we've prepared our clients for such situations that we're dealing with in pandemics as well as disasters. And now with the new aspect to kind of re-entering the workforce, we will have some examples on what we're doing to help our clients prepare for the re-entry of employees coming back into the buildings, as well as employees out in the field coming back into the organization. So to touch on kind of the overview of how we approach pandemic and disaster recovery planning or business continuity planning, we begin everything in a discovery phase. We really start and work with the business leaders, understanding the business first and leveraging technology as an implementation of the business case that we're trying to address, i.e. in a pandemic or in a disaster or business continuity phase. So as we approach that, we meet with the business leaders first. We go through each individual division of the business. We understand what the needs are of the business. We then comprise a discovery document. We touch on that discovery document with the leadership. We come to an agreement. The areas in which we're touching on are broad and very extensive. So to put things in perspective, from an office space standpoint, we look at security. We understand where the physical security is. We look at the environmental side. We look at safety measures on how to enter and exit a building. We look at life safety examples on if there's a panic button, where to place a panic button, all the way through entry into an office or common areas to ensure that we are protecting the employees and protecting the business. The other areas that we look at is the temporary workspaces for solutions. So if there is a natural event, such as a tornado, a hurricane, a flood, that we have solution assistance that we can bring in trailers. We have temporary workspaces that can be set up. Those are relative based upon what the business needs are. So if you determine that your business needs are within a 24-hour window, we have agreements in place that we can actually have tractor trailers brought into parking lots. We have temporary space that we can have stood up. We have cubicles that we can stand up, everything from remote solutions for microwave to internet access through traditional forms. The other piece of the discovery is business and technology policy review. The biggest thing that we run into in the gaps is that the technology does not meet business, the business does not meet technology. They have an understanding that the technology is there, but really what does that mean to the business? So we look at things such as business communications. How do you deal with, how do you alert, when do you advise? How do you then communicate that out? Do you communicate that out of emails down? Do you have a solution that you can send out text messages? How those text messages should be formulated. So as you think about this pandemic, and all of a sudden as the government's released the stay-at-home policy, how do you text out those policies? How do you make sure that everybody is adhering to those policies? How do you get basically what we'll call a dashboard of people who have clicked on the policies, understand the policies, and then from there you can move forward. We use various forms of technology to accommodate that, but we're protecting the business through those policies at the same time, ensuring that the employees are made aware of the policies that they're accepting, as well as offering training solutions at the same time. The other piece and component of it, which is the creation of security, risk, and compliance review. So again, we're looking at things such as your WISP, your security plan, your disaster recovery plan, your incident response plan. In those first three examples, we're looking at everything from life safety to you may have just a simple outage of an application. You may have an incident that you have an at-risk employee have a problem. How do you communicate that? Who do you call? You may have a power outage. You may have a simple leak of water. We approach each one of those in a very detailed way so that everyone is aware on how to approach things through run books or playbooks so that there is no gap in understanding and you can immediately address those situations through training, awareness, and even for people that are on the outside of the group of the managers who are managing these things, it's very clear on how to address and communicate those responses at the same time. PII and HIPAA, we go through looking at the way that you guys are addressing your PII and HIPAA. And again, based upon this pandemic, the government waived the HIPAA violations, but getting back to thinking about those policies on how do you review something at home, how do you make sure that you're protecting people's personal information, their health information, that's all part of that policy and creation and how we communicate that out. And then MDR is a way in which we monitor, detect, and respond to security incidences that if a client does not have the means of monitoring remote access, as an example, as we're going through this, we have means in which we can monitor that, detect potential nefarious characters, attacks, someone scanning it, somebody who lost their laptop or has a bad connection at their house, that their house has been breached. We have solutions that we put in place to help mitigate any type of calls that will bring some type of a damage or an effect to the firm or the company. So we try to have that holistic approach across the board. So from the BIA, we approach it in that manner. It's a very exhaustive effort. Depending on the size of the engagement, the BIA could be a simple 1 day, 2 day, as much as the most lengthy BIA is about a week. Outside of that, we handle data center migrations and relocations. We have communication templates that have already been created so that when we approach a client, we're not charging you to basically recreate something. They're very standard. They're very boilerplated. We've been doing this for 20+ years. So instead of charging our clients for these communication templates, we provide them as part of the BIA, what we call a request for information. As part of that, we hand you the templates, and then you can then tweak the templates yourself, or you can have us work with you on tweaking those templates. The other part of this is, which we've all seen and has become near and dear to everyone, is this telecommuting process. So most of our clients that have gone through the BIA, as an example, were prepared for this type of event. They had their remote access. They already knew how to address their remote workforces. We came up with some creative solutions, even with clients that did not approach the BIA in a thorough process, that we help them through some other scenarios just by our understanding of the use of technology and the awareness of how to work with this telecommuting workforce. So we had technology and training assistance by using tools that we had in our back pocket. And then we provided a quick security analysis for our clients that needed to make sure that they were as secure as possible through this event, because we were literally, as everybody else was on this call, not blindsided, but we went from on-premise to remote workforce within a matter of days. And in some cases, people were doing it in a matter of hours. As part of the wrap-up of that, we pretty much have a hardware and software review that we then deliver, including the infrastructure piece of it as well, that we come back with a complete recommendation for total cost of ownership. And in some cases, we may be able to even show some savings because you may be using duplicate products or other areas, that processes that we may be able to identify and increase efficiencies in as well. So that's our capabilities overview of the way we approach disaster recovery and pandemic planning. And then to add on to that, now that we have this re-entry of the workforce coming back, we are now, as you think about these workplace solutions, we're working with our clients on how to define where to put the cubicles, how to distance the cubicles, how to distance the workers, to putting up shields. So if you have a call center, for example, and you have people that are required to come back on-prem, we are actually setting up those workplace solutions for them. And then on top of that, we're working with them on how to then meter that. We're putting out stations for hand sanitizers. And then on top of that, we offer a solution through Aurora, which is a human sensor tool that basically you can mount them on the walls. You can mount them at the front desk. You can mount them in the front of the building so that when people walk up, within a matter of seconds, it'll scan that person and give you a temperature sensor type of result so that you know if that person has a high temperature or not. Or even if they're in the office and they say they are not feeling well, you can then have them walk up to one of these sensors, and those sensors will then pick up the temperature, and then you can take, again, using the policies and things that have been put in place by the CDC and your companies yourselves, you can then start whatever remediative effort you need to address that individual. A lot of our clients are putting these types of devices in place before the employee even enters the building or enters the office place, and then the person sitting at the front desk approves the person from entering into the workplace. And again, we have developed the policies in the guidelines with CDC and the companies to ensure that everybody has the protections they need, not only for the individual, but for the rest of the people that are re-entering the workforce and coming back into their office spaces. Next slide, Joe. So when we start these types of things, these are some of the questions that we work with, and it's a pretty straightforward question and answer. So we usually start off with, what is your current remote access and worker solution? And then from there, we can derive what you saw on the capability slide, some solutions that we can put in place, and I'll have some examples after this slide. We look at, because a lot of people, as we've all heard and as we've seen it across the board, even working telecommuting at home with your children in your house, with the networks in the neighborhoods now being saturated, people, in the very beginning just thought, I'm just going to go home and work from home. Then you started to see the saturation of not just the house network, but the neighborhood network, and then in some cases a geo network saturation, depending if you're in a tertiary market, that was causing problems for people then to gain access to the network. So we came up with different scenarios such as hotspots, if the network was there and it was saturated from an internet standpoint, and we've worked on other things such as mesh networks to help people get around those solutions or those issues. Excuse me. So the last piece of this is a lot of companies have Windows 10. Some people have Linux, but depending on the version of Windows 10 that you were using and you had laptop-based users or even physical device users such as desktops, there was an easy way to make sure that when those people left the office, that they weren't interrupted by clicking on buttons, starting third-party applications to gain access back to the network. I'll cover this in a little bit more depth as an example slide next. But basically, it allows you to have what's called a seamless experience so that the end user can just function and not be interrupted in trying to figure out how do I click on something, and then prompt me for different types of things. So next slide, please. So from a staff augmentation standpoint, our capabilities are pretty straightforward. We have certified network and Microsoft engineers for client assistance. We have a 24/7, 365-day-a-year SOC and NOC and help desk. So the reason that this has come up is because when people are going through an experience like this pandemic, your employees are focused, your IT department is focused on their own personal needs. And so we helped a lot of our companies come in and do staff augmentation and allowing the employees to focus on at-school training or at-home school training or assistance with their elderly parents. And then that way it alleviated, and then we were allowing the companies to still move forward and be successful and be efficient, and we were stepping in as overflow. The Network Support Center actually came in and helped people from monitoring their networks, making sure, as we spoke about a second ago, it's called MDR, that if there was a security risk or they wanted to have extra protections, we had services that we could spin up relatively quickly, run through onboarding those clients, helping them understand where their risks were, remediating those risks, and then moving them forward into a more secure environment, as well as monitoring their systems for them, because since they weren't in the office and hypothetically some of these businesses aren't deemed as essential, so we were helping them monitor their equipment and keeping their equipment patched and up and running during that time. Deployment engineers is that we actually have white glove people as well as engineers that were going out to people's houses, helping them get things set up if they didn't have a good remote access experience. Not everybody is versed in helping people over the network, and some people, even if you were, you can't really help them because they're just struggling. So we had the ability, because of being essential, we were offering white glove service to people's houses, to also setting up temporary workspaces, helping out hospitals and doing staff aug around there and helping them get their operating rooms, their patient rooms set up. So we have those services as well. We have a very deep bench of Cisco engineers to help with any type of needs, such as people having problems with their firewalls weren't configured correctly, to handle those types of events like we went into. So we did everything in our power to work with them and then remediate it to, again, focus on the efficiencies and keeping the business running, as well as making sure that they were secure at the same time. Again, short-term engagements, we've done a lot of these. I mean, some of our average engagements were less than 20 hours. So we would give them what was called a general technical support agreement. Here's a block of hours, call us when you need it. And then ad hoc support for equipment staging, switches, firewalls, access points, to laptops, to PCs. We have a very deep relationship with the vendors. Since we are essential, we were allowed to get equipment on the fly to help people really get their company up and running in a remote access standpoint by delivering those PCs pre-configured, as well as any device at their house they needed. And then complete or overflow. I touched on the help desk services already, but we provide services around verticals. So our help desk is very vertical focused. It's a healthcare, it is finance, it is general, and it is legal. So when you call and you ask a question about a certain application, they are versed in the majority of the applications in those verticals so that they can help you in an expedient fashion. Next slide, please. So some of the way that we assess those needs is we have to the same format as the other one, simple questions. Can we support your network operations, deployment services with our engineers? Really that answer is 9 times out of 10 yes, because they are struggling keeping up with the demand, the request, as well as troubleshooting. Do you require temporary help with your network, Microsoft Citrix projects, or staging of equipment? Again, I'll have an example coming up shortly that will give you an idea of how we engaged a customer and turned something around that was somewhat of a detriment to their business and turned it into a success. Do you need help troubleshooting network issues, either remotely or on site, or even from somebody's house? Do you need help assessing remote working capabilities and security of the platform? Those are the areas that when we come into the staff augmentation piece, compared to doing a BIA, we're really trying to assess where we can fit your needs. And again, being very nimble in this workplace, being very nimble in the situation that everybody was presented with through this pandemic has really paid off for our clients, and we're glad that we could help out where we could. Next slide. So these are some customer success stories to give you an example. So this client basically, they were in a state, they were in a city. Within, like a lot of other people, they were told, starting tomorrow, in some cases starting 10 days from now. Their case was starting 2 days from now, you no longer have access to your building. And even though law firms around the country in most places were considered essential, in this city they were considered not essential. So what we did is through licensing and through other types of provisioning, so we went and procured laptops for them. We had Windows 10 Enterprise, which is the top version of Windows 10, and it came with a product called Autopilot. What that allowed is that we could ship laptops directly from manufacturing. As soon as it came to the house of the employee, they basically opened the laptop up. As soon as they logged in, it authenticated them to the cloud, and it downloaded the image that was the firm's proven image to configure the machine for them. It took about 45 minutes per machine. That way we didn't have to have the machines deployed to one location, configured, and then shipped back out again, which would have delayed the process. We had laptops in people's possession within a matter of days, and they were up and running within a 3-day period as if they were sitting in the office. We leveraged the technologies that were built into the Windows 10, again, going back to the simplifying, allowing these people just to work without understanding how many buttons do I have to click and so forth and so on. So under Windows 10, there's this product it's a feature called Always On VPN. It's coupled with Office 365 and Teams, which I'll touch in a second. But basically what it allows the end user to do is, as soon as they boot up, the VPN initiates itself, it's connected to the network, and they can start working as if they were in the office without being prompted to launch a VPN product, to do anything else. The one thing that they were prompted with as they initiated the VPN, which is called multi-factor authentication, which is also part of this M365 E5 suite. So what happened would be is that the user would log in. As soon as their machine was initiated, it would prompt them for another authentication manner. And that way we were ensuring that the device was not hijacked or compromised. At that point, they could log in. We also went through the whole entire initiation with people that did not have Teams, which is the replacement for Skype for Business. We went through an education process that we had videos to show people how to do team meetings. So we were deploying Teams from people's houses. We were helping them do video conferencing over their Wi-Fi, their cell phones, their hotspots. We were working with them on configuring the priorities in their own home networks to make sure that the priority was the business leaders themselves, and I'm sorry to say this, but not the children who were watching Netflix and other things. So we actually worked with them through various means to make sure that their experience while they were conducting business, leveraging the tools of their trade, but doing it all through one collective interface, which is Microsoft Office and Windows Enterprise, as well as making sure that the experience was secure. With the Microsoft Enterprise and the M365, it allows us to monitor, to predict, and to understand if there was a problem with that user's PC. As it was starting to form, we would get a notification. That notification would tell us maybe hypothetically they're being scanned from within their own network because there's another device in their network at home, or hypothetically that they mistakenly deleted something. We could tell that they deleted something and then make sure that it was undeleted, or even just from an experience standpoint that if we saw slowness, we would actually get a predictive email saying we're seeing disconnects, we're seeing that there's multiple logins. So it really helped us support the clients in a proactive instead of a reactive state. Next slide, please. There was a global real estate provider that basically, as this continued to roll through, we had to establish site-to-site VPNs for the staff from virtually anywhere. Again, this is just another way to get things done. They did not have the Windows 10 Enterprise version, so we deployed the Meraki Always On VPN or Auto VPN. It establishes VPNs by using dashboards. It's relatively straightforward. Coupling that with a mobile solution, an office can be located, a person can be located anywhere and have a secure experience by just basically plugging a modem in either USB or, in fact, just connecting to that modem and then running that modem as if it was a virtual office. So we leveraged multiple technologies because the one size doesn't fit all, but it really allowed us to be nimble and look at what each client was requiring, what gaps we needed to fill, how fast we could fill those gaps, and we did that through the various means that we have in our portfolio. Next slide, please. So open for Q&A. So we have a chat window open, and if somebody wants to post a question, we will answer anybody's questions that they have. I know this is a lot to cover in a short period of time, but in the essence of trying to get something in front of you guys to understand our capabilities, but also some examples of where and how we can help you navigate the current state and hopefully the future state, which will improve in your businesses.
Lee, this is Joe here again. We do have a couple questions.
Okay.
The first one is, can you provide some examples of New Era's pandemic consulting team helped clients prepare for this event, ensuring minimal interruption?
Yeah, so we have about 15 consultants that are well-versed in pandemic as well as compliance and risk as well as disaster recovery. So in essence of going back to the beginning of the first slide about the BIA, we can actually come in and do a rapid BIA, which we did for some of our clients. As an example, we had another client that really didn't have a disaster recovery or a pandemic plan. So and at the time that they were trying to get their office up and running, there was I'll call it a shortage of PCs and laptops. We literally came up with a program by meeting with them in a half a day that we literally picked up their desktops out of their offices, transported them to their houses, connected them through a very similar form through a Meraki type of VPN, so that was secure. And we worked with them over a period of 3 to 4 days, and there's about 400 users. Those 400 users were back up and running in a productive state within 4 days by just being nimble and understanding kind of where those gaps are. But again, we did what we call a rapid BIA, which was met with the firm leadership, tried to understand where the gaps were. We investigated where supplies were, and we came up with alternatives to get them back up and running.
That's great. So you actually covered one, an example of a BIA engagement and the timeline and cost. We do have another question: are there any geographic limitations to these services?
There are not. We cover the U.S. as well as the UK and abroad. We had a client who has offices in Moscow, Beijing, Dubai, Emirates, Brazil, and in Americas. We walked through the same process and working with all those different entities, ensuring that they could still be productive.
Great. You just answered kind of the last question that just came in there. So with that being said, I think we're coming up on our 30 minutes. So we want to thank everyone for attending this webinar. We trust everybody found it informative. If you would like more information on the topics covered here today, we can be contacted at solutions@neweratech.com. This presentation was also recorded and can also be found on our website at neweratech.com. Thanks everybody for attending, and stay safe and healthy.